3, 2, 1. In order to prevent accidents that could have been prevented, we're happy to propose this motion today. So first, as Prime Minister, I'm going to do 4 things inside my speech. Firstly, I'm going to give you the model. Secondly, I'm going to give you the characterization of the elderly. Thirdly, I'm going to explain why this is bad. Finally, I'm going to explain why after taking this proposal, the accidents are likely to be prevented. So firstly, on the model. When a civilian reaches a certain age, we're going to deprive the driver's license and it's going to lose its function. The age is going to be around, for example, 70 years old, the age where physical and cognitive abilities massively decrease on average, and the age that people are likely to get diseases. There will be no exceptions and everyone's driver's license will be deprived. We say that the elderly are likely to cause accidents, and by banning them from driving, we can decrease the number of car accidents. So next, I'm going to move on to the characterization of elderly. What do the elderly at this age or older look like? I have 4 characterizations. Firstly, the physical ability massively decreases and the body movement will become worse. This looks like people having worse eyesight, people having worse hearing abilities. The body function gets worse, like power to turn the handle is going to decrease, your knee gets weak and they can't push the brakes hard enough. Second characterization is that the cognitive ability of these people massively decreases and it takes time for the brain to translate the event into danger. This looks like, for example, the elderly sees a children suddenly jumping in from the car, but it takes time to decide to push the brakes because they cannot translate it immediately into danger. Also, the reflexes get worse, so even if you know that you need to stop the car and push the brakes, your feet don't move as you think that it will. I think they're more slower than other people, and consequently, the car is likely to go past the time that it needs to be stopped. It's unlikely to stop in time, leading to the death of the innocent children or innocent people. Thirdly, the possibility of having a disease massively increases in general when you're older. For example, you could have sudden chokes, you could have sudden heart attacks, or cancer starts hurting and suddenly passing, or like you can't concentrate on driving or something. I think passing out for just a few seconds when you're driving is very deadly. When you're driving, for example, 40 kilometers per hour, I think that you're driving like 30 meters without seeing anything, and that's like 7 to 8 cars, and you can obviously see how deadly this is. Fourth characterization is that many people have dementia. This means that many people simply forget the driving rules, right? They forget certain road signs that they don't usually see. They oversee the speed limits and forget what they mean. I think this is simply dangerous and the police cannot catch every single violation on the traffic rules on the road. I think that is why people who cannot remember like the traffic rules shouldn't simply drive, right? What is the conclusion of the characterization? We say, overall, the average elderly does not have enough ability to drive safely, right? At the point that where the majority at that age cannot pass the initial driver's test we take at 20 years old or so, I think that they should not be allowed to drive because probably they're going to fail the driving test that we take at 20 years old or so, right? So why are the elderly possessions of driver's license bad? I think that is because the possibility of accidents is high. 2 reasons. Firstly, I think elderly, if they have a driver's license, are very likely to drive. I think in the world 50 years ago is different from the world today. And I think like long ago, the primary source of mobility was cars instead of public transport. I think therefore, the elderly have the custom of driving more than using buses or trains in the first place. But secondly, I think they're likely to cause accidents. From the characterization, they obviously don't have the capacity to drive safely, right? I think cars are lethal weapons and driving is banned in principle. However, there are exceptions to people who have a driver's license. The premise to be granted the license is that you have enough ability to handle dangerous situations on roads, right? So we say this motion is unique and we must deprive all elderly's license. The reason why there are no alternatives like giving back license is because many people have optimism bias and they think that they would be okay, I would be okay, because they have never triggered an accident themselves. So they think that they're different from those who cause accidents. The truth is that it can happen to anyone if they have the 4 characteristics, and we say that it is too dangerous. Why is the world after taking this proposal good? If we deprive all elderly of their driver's license, I think there will be far less accidents, right? Because there are largest potential actors in causing accidents in the first place. We are happy to ban them from driving and deprive them of their driver's license. So happy to propose.
Three, two, one, go ahead. I'm going to talk about 2 things in my speeches. Number 1, counter model. Number 2, our argument, which is about elderly's life, especially in local area. So moving on to our counter model. Our counter model is tightening of driver's license renewal system. I have 3 contents in this counter model. Firstly, we increase the frequency of renewal. In the recent system, elderlies have to renew license every 3 years. In this counter model, we oblige elderlies to renew license every 6 months. This is a different point. Secondly, we tighten qualification standards. In the recent system, elderlies just watch lecture movies and drive for a very small amount of time. So the check has become a mere formality. It is difficult to exclude elderlies who have bigger potential to cause accident. In this counter model, we seriously check elderly's ability. For example, eyesight, hearing, reflexes, and power two-step brake. Driving school staff will examine and monitor which elderly's condition on roads. If the elderly's ability is not enough to drive, we will not allow renewal. Through these 2 contents, we can detect declines in physical strength and cognitive abilities at an early stages. Thirdly, exclusivity of our counter model is that government proposal will blanketly deprive all elderly's right to drive without concerning each condition. Opposition's proposal will exclude elderlies who have more risk and minimize risk of accidents. But at the same time, we protect right of elderlies who can drive well. Reasonable balance can be kept, so our counter model is superior. Then, moving on to our argument. My argument is about how elderly's life will be miserable, especially in local area. There are 3 analyses. First, current context. In the current society, elderlies can drive based upon their own necessities. For example, if they are living in urban area, they can easily use public transportation because number of bus and trains is much bigger than local area. On the contrary, in the local area, elderly's own cars are likely to be only way of moving. The bus only comes twice a day. The train line has closed already. But supermarket is far away. You cannot walk to. Doctors live in areas with larger populations. So access to food, medical, any other daily items is not so good, unfortunately. Which means for elderlies, in order to spend healthy and culturally enriched life, car is very important too. Second, situation of after plan. All of elderlies are deprived driver's license. So, access to daily items and medical will be cut. It leads to impacts. A. Elderly's physical and psychological condition will be worse. They refrain from eating because casually they cannot buy foods. The frequency of seeing a doctor decreases. Opportunity to go out itself decreases. They tend to withdraw from social interaction. Gradually, their physical and psychological condition will be worse. Therefore, the risk of disease and death increase. If elderlies want to avoid such a situation, they have to change place to live. They will move to areas with a larger urbanized population and public transportation. Even in this case, still problem exists. Impact B, violation of the right residence. The reason why elderlies live in the local area is that they want to live. For example, historically, their family has lived continuously. They want to pass this tradition on to the next generation. Or simply they love the area's view, feel sympathy to cityscape. Or the house filled with memories of their deceased partner. Point is that the value to live in the area is different person to person. Moreover, government has duty to protect the right of residents within the framework of freedom of choice, because government cannot measure scale of happiness born from residents. For example, even if areas near the sea or mountains have the risk of disasters, people are permitted to live in. Therefore, this proposal structurally excludes elderlies from a local area and violates the right of residents. As a government, we cannot ignore this situation. Therefore, we oppose.
Okay, I will start my speech in 3, 2, 1. As member of government, I'm going to do two things. Firstly, I'm going to flip the value of after taking this proposal and say the local society will be better on our side of the house. Next, I'm going to argue on principle justification and prove why it is justifiable to deprive the right to drive. Therefore, we comprehensively take the debate and all rebuttals are going to be included inside my argument. So, firstly, why in the world after taking this motion, there will be more services such as public transportation in local areas? LO says there's no method of transportation for the elderly in local areas in the world AP. However, we say this is not true. We can see that if all elderly people don't have driver's license, daily lives will be difficult. However, then I think the government will opt to expand the systems that will support their daily lives. This looks like three things. Firstly, in terms of transportation, think A, there's going to be more public transportation services. For example, more number of routes of buses, and more train stations or more railway expansions. B, I think there's going to be legal changes in flexible transportation. This looks like expansion of private taxi systems like Uber, or giving vouchers to use all of these services so that it is more accessible. Secondly, I think there's going to be diversity in the retail industry. For example, door-to-door sales of not only food, but also clothes, bags, etc. in order to enrich the lives of these people. Thirdly, I think there's going to be more investment in online services. For example, A, government investment in online medical services and subscription services so that you don't have to go to the hospital in order to get medicine. But B, also investing in proliferation of online purchasing services like giving out vouchers of Amazon or Co-op and enabling these people to use more of these services. I think that this is likely to happen in the world after taking this proposal. Why is this true? I think this is because elderly have massive political power for two reasons. Firstly, the elderly itself is a large voter base, right? Number of people surviving until you're old is on the increase in any country, and I think the government cannot ignore their difficulties in general. But secondly, the voter base of the children of the elderly, the working adults, will care for the elderly's well-being as well. In the world after taking this proposal, they must support them with buying daily products and taking them to the hospital, etc., because they cannot go on their own. Or they must put the elderly into specific elderly homes that cost a lot. This is obviously a large burden for the children. That is why, therefore, there's a large incentive to vote for politicians to support these new systems in the local area. Also, the politicians are likely to have large incentives to cater to these people as well. And I think that is why these kind of new services are likely to occur within the counterfactual. Why is this good? Two reasons. Firstly, because simply the elderly people can continue their daily lives as they used to, and I don't think that they're going to face any difficulties. But secondly, I think it is better than the status quo because A, people who cannot drive, who cannot afford to have a car, not limited to the elderly in the status quo, can finally have access to the necessary services. This looks like increased transport or online medical services or vouchers of these things. And I think that this benefit trickles down to these people as well. But B, we say there's going to be more diverse services and options for all people, like EC services and door-to-door services. I think this is good in general, and therefore counterfactual is better than the status quo. Next, moving on to justification for taking away the rights on mobility. I think it is justifiable for two reasons. Firstly, because we are not depriving the right in the first place, because the right to drive does not exist in the first place. A, we are not restricting the right to walk or go to certain places, so the right to mobility doesn't change for these people. B, as Prime Minister explained, cars are lethal weapons and driving is banned in principle already, right? So there are exceptions to people who have a driver's license, but insofar as we prove to you the elderly does not have any capability to drive, I think that we say are unlikely to have the capability to drive, we say that the right does not exist in the first place. Secondly, I think the restriction based on age is justifiable because there are many analogies. The government already restricts certain things based on age, and because people under or over certain ages are regarded they lack ability, I think that it is justifiable. We say it is justifiable to restrict based on age in two conditions. Firstly, the average individual of the age or younger or older is incapable of practicing the right. Secondly, the mistaken practice in the right leads to severe consequences like death in an accident, right? For example, voting rights are restricted until a certain age around 20 in many countries. This is because an average person under that age is seen as not having the ability to rationally decide the politician to vote for. Of course, there are smart children who have strong political ideologies, but I think that some are unable to control the legal unable to control the legal restrictions that bound them because irrational voting without clean metrics done by the majority of other children leads to serious consequences in the government of the country. That is why we believe this analogy is applicable to the elderly as well. So proud to propose.
In 3, 2, 1. Go ahead. As a member opposition, I'm going to answer this motion from the perspective of principles. This is a critically important aspect because existence of practical merit does not necessarily mean government to do something, because we must carefully consider whether there is any sacrifice or infringement of rights, because government exists in order to protect and guarantee people's rights. For example, inputting microchip into every citizen body will increase deterrent power, but government never do so. For example, if car accident is so dangerous, it does not necessarily mean we ban cars itself. It exemplifies that for government policy, always the aspect that what is valid as a state action. This is very, very, very important. So I want to doubt the validity of this motion from two criteria. Number one, whether or not only elderlies should be regarded as high risk to cause accident. Number two, what should be the criteria of depriving right? Moving on to the first criteria. This is important because government may think elderlies are more risky than middle and young. So they deprive driver's license only from elderlies. I'd like to overturn this premise. I think middle and young people are risky as well as elderlies. Two reasons why. Firstly, middle and young people have less experience than elderlies. How to control speed, knowing where the blind spots in the cities are, how to maintain a safe following distance. These factors are important to avoid accidents. The longer driving history, the more these factors become ingrained as experience. Secondly, middle and young people overestimate own abilities. they think they are enough capable and more capable than elderlies. Because they themselves think they are younger and they have good physical ability. For example, accidents caused by young people driving too fast are frequently reported in the news. These accidents are usually caused by 20s and 30s. They prioritize thrill and temporal pleasure, or they are under pressure, for example, to arrive at workplaces early because younger people, in general, they have low status in the company. Conclusion is that risk of elderlies is not so different from any other generations, which means premise of government bench is broken. But even if category of elderly people itself has inherent risk, still there is no validity to blanketly deprive right. In order to prove this point, moving on to the second criteria. In this criteria, I'd like to show you that when government deprive right, each case should be judged individually. On this point, MG said NG can be criteria to decide right. They picked up the example of voting right. Even if we take their analysis, still, blanket restriction on age is done when we give right. For example, voting right after 18, alcohol after 20, tobacco after 20, gamble after 20. All of these typical examples are the case of giving right, because once we admit certain right, it has a significant impact not only the individual, but also those surrounding people. Therefore, government excessively and blanketly restrict rights based on age. On the contrary, doctor's license, hunting license, or for example, retirement age of laborers and politicians. These examples do not exclude people because of old age. Because in these cases, doctors, hunters, workers, and politicians already show the ability they can do that. That's precisely why it relies on voluntary returns or retirement. Government never forcibly deprive doctors' license just because they are over 70. Case by case, we individually judge whether this elderly is worthy of doctor's license. Then, which case is closer to depriving driver's license? Latter one is more applicable, because elderlies whom we want to protect in this debate consistently demonstrated throughout their lives that they can drive. Therefore, blanket deprivation is invalid. Even if there is a merit, government should not do that. Therefore, we oppose this motion. Thank you. 'EM から MO というですね、試合全体の中でリプライなしではあるものの、コンストラクティブなスピーチ自体は実際の試合でもここまでなので、より実践に近い形でのリーズン4ディシジョンを作ることができるのかなというふうに思います。ですので、この後の解説をですね、見る前に一度ご自身でぜひ考えていただければなと思います。で、本動画においてでもですね、リーズン4ディシジョンは簡潔なバージョンとじっくり説明するバージョンの2つご用意をしております。なので、まずは簡潔に説明するバージョンから始めます。結論から言うとですね、大きな差ではないものの、今回はオポが優勢と判断せざるを得ません。で、理由を一言で言うなら、レレバンシー、論題とのつながりという観点ですね。この部分において、オポジションの方が若干優勢という判断になります。で、結局のところですね、この論題というのは、this house would という書き出し、そういうふうに書かれている以上ですね、いわゆるポリシー論題、政策論題と言われるものに該当しますと。そうなったときに、何が起きるのかというのももちろん大事なんですけれども、じゃあ政府の視点からこの論題っていいんだっけ悪いんだっけという、是非を問う必要がありますと。で、そうなったときに、ガバメントとオポジション、双方がですね、じゃあ政府として権利を誰に、どういう時に認めるべきなのかという、いわゆるプリンシプルですね、という観点で話していました。で、そこについてですね、オポジションの分析の方がより 権利をじゃあどういう時に取り上げていいのか、奪っていいのかという観点で論題の趣旨に添えていて、側の、どちらかというと権利を上げる時の話に比べると、より説得力はありました。またですね、論題によって生じる、いわゆるプラクティカルなメリット、デメリットというのは試合内で明確な比較がなく、ジャッジとして評価がしづらかったというところと、仮にそこが側の方が優勢だったとしても、結局、じゃあ政府として最後どうするべきなのかという話にはまだつながっていなかったのかなというのがあるので、今回のリース・フォーティシジョンには影響を与えないというふうに判断しております。以上で、今回はオポジションの方が優勢かなというふうに考えます。結論から言うとですね、大きな差ではないものの、オポが優勢、オポに傍答するという判断となります。で、理由を一言で言うならば、レレバンシーですね。論題とのつながりという観点で、本当に若干ではあるものの、オポジションの方が優勢という判断です。二つの大きな観点で見ていきます。一つ目はですね、プラクティカルなメリットとデメリット。二つ目はですね、プリンシプル、政府として何をするべきか、何をすることが正しいのか、ということになります。で、一つ目ですね。結論から言うと、プラクティカルなメリットとデメリットは、ガバとオポで大きな差は見られませんでした。まず、ガバの主張ですね。シンプルに言うと、政策実行後の世界では、エルダリーによる事故が減少して、ビクティブの数は減りますよね、という内容でした。この話において重要なこととしては、オポジションから来ていたエルダリーも若い世代も事故の確率そんなに変わらないんじゃないかという部分ですね。こういう反論来ていたんですけれども、これは今回考慮しません。理由としては、仮にエルダリーと若い世代が同じぐらい事故を起こしかねないとしても、エルダリーから運転免許を奪って、エルダリーに運転をさせないことで、事故のリスクを減らせるというロジック自体は残るんですね。なので、側が達成したいプラクティカルなゴール自体は、政策実行後の世界で、きちんと達成できているのかなという判断ですと。一方ですね、オッポの主張は何なのかというところですけれども、ローカルエリアにおいて、車って不可欠なものですよねと。政策実行後の世界では生活の質が下がって、心身ともに悪影響が出るというものでしたと。で、この点についてですね、MG のところから、政策実行後の世界では、公共交通機関が増えますよね。拡充されますよね。だから問題ないですという反論が来ていました。すごくいい観点での反論かなというのはあったんですけれども、本当にそれって実現可能なのかという部分は結構疑問が残りました。で、少し詳しく見ていくんですけれども、MG からの説明としては、エルダリーって数が多いし、政治家も無視できませんよね。ですとか。いや、エルダリーの子供とか孫自体も、そういうの支持するんじゃないですかという話がありました。ただ、現状でもすでにローカルエリアにおいては、パブリックトランスポーテーションの数が減らされたりとか、電車が廃線になるという状況がある中で、それをの LO が説明している中で、政策実行後の世界で、仮に政治家が、声は聞いてくれたとしても、それを実現させるための予算とか計画ってどういうふうにやるのかなといった部分は、説明がなかったんですね。なので、ジャッジとして聞いていると、声は聞いてくれるかもしれないけれども、それが本当に LO が言っているような生活の質が悪化することを止めるほどのパブリックトランスポーテーションの拡充につながるのかというのは、ちょっと最後までジャッジには伝わりませんでした。なので、オポの言うエルダリーにとっての心身への悪影響といった部分は同じように評価ができますと。で、ここで問題になるのが、両サイドから明確な比較、コンパリゾンというのは今回提示されていないんですね。事故によって被害を受ける人、生活の礎となる車を奪われて心身に悪影響が出るエルダリと。どちらの方が、例えば数が多いかだったりとか、影響の度合いが大きいのかというような、コンパリゾンっていうのは試合の中でなされていませんでした。なので、この観点で差をつけることは困難かなというのがジャッジとしての判断です。で、二つ目のですね、観点に見ていきたいと思います。結局ですね、この論題が This House would と書かれているポリシー論題である以上、政府の視点から論題の是非を問う必要がありますと。これはそもそも論題の性質的にそういうものですというのもあるんですけれども、MO の冒頭からも明示的に示されていいかなと思いますと。いわゆるべき論と呼ばれるものですね。これはプラクティカルなメリットの有無ではなく、それが政府として正しい行為なのかというのが政策実行の可否を決める上で重要という意見です。 一つの例として、例えば犯罪抑止力を向上させるために、全国民の体にマイクロチップを入れて監視。抑止力上がるけれども、そういうことしませんよねと。権利の侵害なんで。こういった例も出されていました。要は、仮にメリットを埋めるとしても、権利の侵害につながるようなことを政府としては容認できません。そういうポリシー取ってはいけませんよね。という話でした。で、この観点で見たときに2つの議論がなされていました。1つ目は、エルダリーのみから免許を剥奪するのってフェアなことなんだっけというところと。2つ目はですね、権利を取り上げる、人々から権利を奪っていいのはどういう状況の時なんだろう。こういった話でした。1つ目のですね、フェアネスについては、ガバとオポで比較すると大きく差はつかないというのが判断です。で、ガバから来ていたエルダリーの方が事故を起こしやすい要因というのはよくわかります。身体能力だったり認知能力の低下、あとは病気のリスク、こういった分析がなされていました。一方でオポから来ていた話というのは、エルダリーより若いミドルとかヤングのジェネレーションっていうのは、経験が浅かったりとか、道のことよく知らなかったりとか、あとは楽観的に考えてしまったりとか、自分自身の目の前の快楽を追い求めてしまうとか、そういったお話がありました。実際、例えばスリルとかスピードを求めてスピードを出しすぎて事故を起こすニュースとかっていうのをよく見るので、こちらも一定の説得力があるのかなという判断です。で、ポイントとしてはですね、どちらかというとガバメントは、キャパシティ、アビリティ的な話が多くて、で、オポジションはどちらかというと、考え方とかマインドセットの話になっていました。で、人が何か行動するときに、能力やキャパシティといったものと、そもそもそれをしたいかどうかというところだったりとか、それを自制するためのマインドセットというのは、基本的なセットで考えられますと。なので、ジャッジからすると、ガバとオポ双方が異なる視点で事故の要因となるリスクについて述べていて、それぞれすごくわかる内容だったんですね。ただ結局、じゃあどっちの方がより、例えば事故に直結するのかっていうような分析とかはなかったんですね。なので、ジャッジとしては優劣がつけづらい状況でしたと。なので、エルダリーと、それより若い世代を比べたときに、どちらの方が事故をより起こしやすいのかっていった部分は、今回の試合の中ではあまり結論付けられてないかなという判断です。2つ目にですね、権利を取り上げるのはどういう状況なのか。ここについては、本当にスライドではあるんですけれども、オポが優勢という判断になりますと。で、ガバはですね、その年代の人の平均的な能力値で考えて、年齢で区切って権利を決めると。これは妥当ですよねという話がありました。例として、選挙権などは特定の年齢にならないと与えられないという部分の、例示もなされていましたと。これは確かに年齢で区切ることの一定の説明にはなっていますし、エグザンプルもすごくわかりやすいかなと思います。しかしですね、オポジションはより、論題に即した、じゃあ権利を奪っていいとき、取り上げるときってどういうときなんだろう。こういう観点で議論の展開ができていました。まず最初に言っていたのは、年齢で一律で区切られるものって基本的に権利を与えられるとき限定、権利を与えるとき限定ですよねと。例えば酒やタバコやギャンブルやそれこそ選挙権といったところですね。一方で、例えば医師免許、あと狩猟免許、もしくは企業や国会議員の定年といったものについては、基本的に年齢で一律で取り上げられることはないですよねと。個別具体の状況に応じて、それこそ本人の自主的な返納だったりとか、資格の停止とかっていう判断がありますよねと。こういう話がありました。で、その背景はですね、権利を与えられる前の人とは異なって、権利を行使する過程でもうその能力があるっていうことをすでに示されている人たちだからと理由付けもなされていました。なので、双方の主張ですとか、その背景にあるリーズニングっていうのはよくわかりますと。ただ結局、用いられていたエグザンプルですとか、主張がより論題に沿っているのかどうかというところですね。要は、エルダリーから運転免許を剥奪するという観点に近く話せていたのはオポジションでした。したがって、本当にスライトな差ではあるものの、オポジションの主張の方が上回っていて、エルダリーから一律で免許を剥奪する妥当性は低くて、むしろ権利の侵害なのかなという結論になります。なので最終的にまとめますと、プラクティカルな変化としては、両者そこまで差がつかないものの、べき論、何が政府として正しいことなのかという観点では、この政策は、人々の権利を守るという観点からは、ちょっと政府として許容できるものではないというところで、今回はオポジションに冒頭するということになります。以上です。